Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to thank the panel and of course a special aloha thank you to Mr. Perrone. I have had the pleasure of working with your local president, Pat Liu, over the years. So much mahalo for your leadership because your people truly are on the front lines. I thank all of the panelists and I'd like to ask whether any one of our panelists think that we do not need a science-based regulatory requirement that protects workers and consumers. Is there anybody on the panel who thinks we do not need this? Thank you. Let me ask Professor Vladek a question. I know you touched upon this because under tort law, you actually have to show negligence. And as this particular virus is so easily transmittable, it is not going to be an easy thing when you sue anyone to show that you got that virus from that particular place. I mean, without negligence, without being able to show negligence, you have no claim. Isn't that right, Professor?
That's right. I mean, you have to show causation. That's the core allegation the plaintiff needs to make in a complaint. And frankly, no lawyer is going to take these kinds of cases on because the causation problem in most cases is unsolvable.
I would agree with you. And also, not only do you have to show causation, but you have to make sure that there are no intervening acts that led to your injury. That's
right,
another
that's the problem. If you've been outside, and in New York, there were a lot of people who got the virus even when they were housebound. So the question about causation is just a devilishly difficult question here. And I don't think you'll see a lot of those kinds of cases.
I agree with you, and it's also a pleasure. I'm one of the 3 members on the committee who graduated from Georgetown Law School.
Oh, well, this is a great day for
pleasure. I have a question for Ms. Dixon. You did touch upon this in your testimony also, but the kind of harm that would happen if we provide this kind of basically blanket immunity would create a race to the bottom for businesses who some of them are bad actors and they may do the minimum. And wouldn't that have a disproportionate negative effect on many of the workers who represent minority groups?
Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Dixon?
Yes, that's
Do
correct.
you want to expound on that just a little bit more?
Yes, we know that historically certain workers, their well-being has been undervalued. And these workers who are on the front lines, who are doing the meat processing and retail, have been historically undervalued and are also heavily Black workers, Latinx workers, and immigrant workers.
And also, by the way, most states, I think there's only one state that does not have a workers' compensation law. And that law basically says that if you are injured in your employment, you give up the right to sue your employer, even if that employer is negligent, for the health care that will be provided to you. So basically what we're talking about today is who should bear the risk? Businesses who control the conditions in which they run their businesses, or the workers or customers who walk in the door. This is once again for Professor Vladek. Who do you think is in the best position to bear the risks of liability created by COVID-19 claims? Businesses, who, as Ms. Dixon mentioned, have, and others have mentioned, have insurance coverage, or workers and consumers?
Well, my own view, of course, is that the businesses and the employers bear the risks here, bear the costs of whatever injury that takes place. That's the way our liability system has worked for 200 years.
But in the case of the businesses, can't they lower their liability risk by following science-based? And I make that point, it has to be science-based, the regulatory requirements that really protect workers and consumers. Can't they lower their exposure to liability if they follow?
Right, that's
those kinds of requirements.
That's the ticket to avoid liability, which is every state recognizes a regulatory compliance defense, and that defense is strongest when an employer like Mr. Smart is relying on an evidence-based standard that that is enforceable by the government.
So I think 2 things that are made very, very clear during this hearing, Mr. Chairman. For one thing, there will not be a tsunami or tidal wave of lawsuits based on a tort claim for exposure to this virus, and the causality issue is a very hard bar. The second thing is that there is agreement that we should have science-based regulatory requirements that truly protect workers and consumers. And I hope that that is the direction that this committee is going. Thank you.